Hey there, I'm Carrie, and welcome back to my 4-part series on the fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Haunted Palace, which is the poetry section within the larger short story. Here's how this video is going to work. We're gonna read through the poem up front. It's not very long. Then we'll go back and break it down line by line, talk about some of the vocabulary and what these words actually mean. And then we will talk about the poem overall, the story it tells, and how it functions within the larger short story, within the fall of the House of Usher. I've got timestamps in the video notes, so definitely scroll down, click around, find exactly what it is you need. And without further ado, let's get into the Haunted Palace. In the greenest of our valleys, by good angels tenanted, once a fair and stately palace, radiant palace, reared its head. In the monarch thought's dominion it stood there. Never seraph spread a pinion over fabric half so fair. Banners yellow, glorious, golden, on its roof did float and flow. All this was in the olden time, long ago. And every gentle air that dallied in that sweet day, along the ramparts plumed and pallid, a winged odor went away. Wanderers in that happy valley through 2 luminous windows saw spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law. Round about a throne where sitting Porphyrogene, in state his glory well befitting, the ruler of the realm was seen. And all with pearl and ruby glowing was the fair palace door, through which came flowing, 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 and sparkling evermore a troop of echoes, whose sweet duty was but to sing in voices of surpassing beauty the wit and wisdom of their king. But evil things in robes of sorrow assailed the monarch's high estate. Ah, let us mourn, for never morrow shall dawn upon him desolate. And round about his home the glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed. And travelers now within that valley through the red litten windows see vast forms that move fantastically to a discordant melody, while like a ghastly rapid river through the pale door a hideous throng rush out forever and laugh but smile no more. All right, so let's go back and look at this one verse at a time and talk about some of the vocabulary, what this language actually means. All right, first verse. In the greenest of our valleys by good angels tenanted. Tenanted means you live there, like a tenant in an apartment building. Once a fair and stately palace, radiant palace, reared its head. So the palace reared its head. We didn't see the palace. The palace wasn't built there. The palace reared its head. It makes the palace seem alive. It's thinking, it's got a will of its own, it's got a body of its own, and it chooses to lift up its head. In the monarch thought's dominion, it stood there. So a monarch is a ruler, like a king or a queen. Thought is king here. Thought is ruling this place. A dominion is like a territory. Never seraph spread a pinion over fabric half so fair. So a seraph is an angel, generally thought to be a very powerful one. This has a Gothic influence, and there will be supernatural elements in Gothic literature. A pinion is part of a wing. It includes the flight feathers, so it's what makes it possible for a bird to take flight. So I think what he's saying here is no angel has ever spread its wings over something as gorgeous as this, over fabric half so fair. No one's seen anything as beautiful as this. Verse 2. Banners yellow, glorious, golden, on its roof did float and flow. If there's a banner over a castle or a palace, it's usually got the emblem of the king or queen or whoever rules that area. So that's what the banner is. On its roof did float and flow. All this was in the olden time long ago, and every gentle air that dallied in that sweet day. Dallied means like you're taking your time, you're dawdling. Along the ramparts plumed and pallid, a winged odor went away. A rampart is a part of a castle wall, very thick piece that is built for defense in case of a siege. Plume is a feather decoration. It's usually referenced in people's hats. People wear a plumed hat and it's very eye-catching. Pallid means pale, but not pale like fair-skinned or something that is naturally light-colored. Pallid usually means pale like you're sick, like unnaturally pale. A winged odor. Winged just means winged. It has wings. It is broken into 2 syllables for the sake of poetry, to make it flow a little bit better. Odor is a smell, like usually a bad smell, so you know what that means. So we've got these first 2 stanzas where everything is very beautiful and peaceful, unhurried, seems very happy and content. But then we've got these words pallid and odor. So I think these are our first hints that something is not quite right here. Something is not in a good, healthy state. Verse 3. Wanderers in that happy valley through 2 luminous windows saw. Luminous means like very bright, shiny. Spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law. So if someone's moving musically, it means they're in rhythm with the music. They're in step. A lute is a small guitar about the size of like a mandolin, and famously they were used by court musicians back in the day, court musicians who would sing songs that told stories. Tuned, it's tuned. The lute is tuned correctly. Again, it's broken into 2 syllables in order to maintain poetic form. So it's saying the spirits moving musically. So the spirits are dancing to the lute's tune, and the lute sounds nice. It's very pretty, and it's got a well-ordered, well-structured song that it's playing. Round about a throne where sitting Porphyrogene. Porphyrogene, I've also heard it Porphyrogene. I don't know. It's a very weird word. I think it is Porphyrogene, but I wouldn't swear to it. But it means someone that is dressed in purple, a royal. Historically, the color purple has been associated with royalty because once upon a time, purple fabric dye was very expensive and very difficult to make. So only very wealthy people, very important people would have purple clothes. So that is how it is associated with royalty and wealth. In state, his glory well befitting. If something's befitting, that means it's appropriate. It suits you. So it's saying his glory is appropriate to him. It's fitting. He deserves it. The ruler of the realm was seen. Okay, so he's glorious. Verse 4. And all with pearl and ruby glowing was the fair palace door. So the palace door is decorated with jewels, through which came flowing, 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 and sparkling evermore. So something is coming out of the palace door. A troop of echoes whose sweet duty was but to sing. So in this context, an echo is someone who repeats something. So if we have a troop of echoes, we've got a group of people, maybe a choir, it sounds like, who have a job just to sing, and they're repeating their song. They're repeating their words over and over and over again. An echo could also be a mimic, someone that's just repeating the words of someone that they admire, someone they idolize, and so they're going to repeat whatever they say and cling on to whatever that person says. In voices of surpassing beauty, the wit and wisdom of their king. So this troop of echoes, this little singing group, this choir, their only job is to sing about the wit and wisdom of the king. Verse 5. But evil things in robes of sorrow assailed the monarch's high estate. So something sad happened. Assail means attack. So sadness attacked this guy. The monarch is the ruler, the king or queen. Your high estate means your status. Like estate, yes, it can mean real estate. It can mean like actual physical land. But estate can also mean your mental state, your emotional state, how you're feeling, how you're thinking at the time. So sadness attacked him and it has rattled him. Ah, let us mourn, for never morrow shall dawn upon him desolate. Morrow means morning, like tomorrow. Desolate means alone. It can also mean heartbroken. So this could mean death, like never another day is gonna dawn, or it can just mean like the good things are over. It's done, it's gone. And round about his home, the glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed. So people might remember the good old days, the glory days, but it is over. Entomb means to bury something. So the good times, the wonderful times in this kingdom, in this palace, they're gone. They're just a memory. Verse 6. And travelers now within that valley through the red litten windows see. Litten means lighted. So we have windows with this weird red light coming out of them. Vast forms that move fantastically to a discordant melody. Vast means huge. Fantastically, like usually we use that in a very positive context. We say, oh, that's fantastic. Like it's awesome. It's amazing. Fantastic actually means related to fantasy. So I want you to think of a dreamscape. When you dream, it's not always awesome. Sometimes it's twisted and weird and bizarre, and that's what this means. It's unnatural, it's unreal. Discordant means it's very harsh. It's not nice to listen to. It's not musical. And a melody is a tune. So we have forms that are moving very bizarrely, very weird movements to this strange music that's not nice to listen to. It's not rhythmic. While like a ghastly rapid river through the pale door, a hideous throng rush out forever. Throng is a large group of people. And laugh but smile no more. Okay, so that last line is like the creepiest line in all of Poe. Picture a person who is laughing, like something hysterically funny has happened. They are doubled over laughing, like tears coming down their face. They just like cannot even handle it because something so funny has happened. Okay, you got the picture? Now take the smile off of that person. They're not laughing, they're screaming. So this group that is rushing out the door is screaming. Something terrible has happened. In The Fall of the House of Usher, this poem is composed and performed by Roderick Usher, a guy who is classically educated, very intelligent, from this very aristocratic family, but his mind, his reason is starting to shake. It is coming apart at the seams. So in the short story, when the narrator first comes across Roderick Usher, he describes his facial features and he uses the words luminous and pallid, both of which are used here in the haunted palace. So the narrator says that Usher's eyes are luminous. And in verse 3, we've got 2 luminous windows. Also that his skin is very pale because he isn't well. It's pallid. And in the second one, we have the walls of the castle that are a pallid color. With that in mind, let's go back and look at some of the imagery in each of these verses. So in verse 1, we have the radiant palace that reared its head. So the palace seems to have a mind and will of its own, maybe a body of its own, and it lifts up its head. So we have the image of a head. In verse 2, we have the banners that are yellow. The yellow banners on the roof that did float and flow. This is also from the short story. The narrator describes Usher's hair, which is a very strange texture, as floating around his shoulders rather than sitting on his shoulders. So we might have blonde hair here on this head. Also, we have the pallid ramparts in this verse, possibly his pale cheeks, his unhealthy complexion. In verse 3, we have the 2 luminous windows. Again, the narrator uses that word to describe Usher's eyes. They're very big and luminous, very shiny. In verse 4, we have the fair palace door that is decorated with rubies and pearls. So think of the palace door possibly as the mouth. Pearl would be the teeth, ruby is the lips. So this is Usher's mouth, and through the door comes a troop of echoes who sing about the wit and wisdom of the king. So the troop of echoes could be his words, and they are witty and they're interesting and they're wise. In verse 5, we have the words blushed and bloomed. These are words that are frequently associated with a person's complexion. So that might mean that once upon a time, he was healthy, he had good, healthy color in his cheeks, he had rosiness in his cheeks, but that is over now. Also, the last line of verse 5 uses the word entombed. That's where you bury something that is dead. And again, when we meet Roderick Usher, the narrator describes his complexion as being cadaverous, like a corpse, like a dead person. So there is no blush, no bloom in his cheeks. In verse 6, we have red litten windows. So back in verse 3, those were luminous windows, very big and bright, and now they are red lit. So that could mean bloodshot eyes, strained, tired eyes. Also in verse 6, we have the pale door. In verse 4, we talked about how the palace door could symbolize the mouth. I think that the pale door could again describe his mouth, because within the short story, the narrator describes him as having pale, thin lips. If we have just described all of Usher's facial features, if the palace is his head, then let's talk about what's inside. So in verse 3, we have our spirits moving musically. I'm thinking of the spirits as his thoughts. So his thoughts are moving harmoniously. They're ordered. They have a purpose. They're in step. And they are moving to a lute's song. This is interesting, because Usher is very attached to stringed instruments in the story, particularly his guitar. So we have them moving nicely, it's peaceful, it's poetic. Contrast that with verse 6, where we have vast forms that move fantastically. So instead of seeming benevolent and content, it seems very ill-defined. It's just large, it's a mass. And they're moving fantastically. It's bizarre, it's twisted, it's unnatural, and it's a discordant melody instead of a nice, beautiful song from this lute, this guitar. So this could mean that his thoughts are now very disordered, and they're moving around, not in harmony with each other. There's just a lot of conflict, and it's very tangled, it's very chaotic. Then we have the troop of echoes, his words that are spilling out of his mouth. And in verse 3, they're flowing, flowing, flowing out of the palace door. His words are flowing out of his mouth. Contrast that with verse 6, where we have a hideous throng, just a huge mass, disordered, not purposed, and it's rushing out. So we've got river imagery there. We have water imagery. In verse 4, it's flowing, flowing, flowing. It's got a nice, peaceful pathway. And then verse 6, it's just rushing. It's out of control. So once upon a time, Usher's thoughts were harmonious and well-ordered, and his words were intelligent, they were witty, and now his thoughts are disordered and clashing, and his words are uncontrolled and chaotic. All right, before we wrap up, let's talk about how this relates to some of Poe's other work. The story within a story technique is also used in the oval portrait. The Haunted Palace also has a lot in common with Annabel Lee, another narrative poem. They're about the same length, they're a similar format, and they are both Gothic tales of remembering something wonderful that is now gone. And the angels and the seraphs have a big role in Annabel Lee as well. However, the big one, in my opinion, is The Masque of the Red Death, which is one of Poe's other short stories. First of all, the plot in The Haunted Palace has a lot in common with the big plot in The Masque of the Red Death. It's kind of weird, actually, and I don't want to spoil it for you, but definitely go and read The Masque of the Red Death. You're going to see a lot of similarities to the things that happen within this haunted palace. We've got a secluded palace that's very bizarre. We've got kind of a strange person running things, and a lot of weird things go on with the tenants of this palace. Also, color progression is very key in The Masque of the Red Death. There is a central scene that moves from room to room of the palace, and each room is a different color. We see something similar here. In the first verse, we've got green. In the second verse, yellow. The third verse, purple. The fourth verse, we've got pearl and ruby. Now, the fourth verse is key because we have red breaking in. Now, in The Masque of the Red Death, I believe that the progression of colors represents the natural progression of time. And red and black are the last colors that the reader is presented with, and they represent death and sorrow. Now, if we apply that same thing to the Haunted Palace, we have green, yellow, purple. These are colors that could represent daylight. They can represent gardens and blooming, a very natural, pleasant place. And then we have red breaking in the fourth verse. We have ruby, then it goes to blush and bloom, which are both associated with red, and finally the red lit windows. So if we look at this progression of colors also representing nature and the passage of time, it's interesting that it gets interrupted by red about halfway through, and it continues to focus on red through the end of the poem. I think that could show that Usher's natural progression as a person, his natural train of thought has been derailed. It's been interrupted, and now he has this unnatural, unhealthy focus on death and sorrow. All right, that's about all I've got on the Haunted Palace and all I've got on the fall of the House of Usher. I will link the first 3 parts of this series in the video notes below in case there is something that you missed. I hope you found something in here that was helpful to you. If you did, please like and subscribe and turn on notifications so you know when the next story or poem becomes available. If you had a different story in mind or a particular author that you're interested in, definitely drop that in the comments and I will see what I can do. Best of luck to you, and I'll see you in the next chapter.